the protests in the streets, and we know that a lot of people are angry and fearful about what is to come. And so I want to, before we get into our show, I just want to talk to you a little bit about overcoming fear and looking at fear for a moment, if you will. And you know, one of the things that I realize is that too many people are not living their dreams, but they are living out their fears. Okay, and we want to move away from that. So one of the first things to understand fear, you must understand trauma. And give you a couple of terms of trauma. I'm no specialist in this. We do have a doctor in the house. They can probably help us out a little bit later on. But this is just information I gather from classes and research and things like that. But primary trauma is when you are directly affected by something and you suffer trauma that way. And then secondary trauma is when you witness and feel afraid for someone else, genuinely feel afraid. Vicarious trauma is when you hear about trauma from someone else and you are physically feeling fear and you're feeling this genuinely. And then there's another term called compassion fatigue. It's tied into burnout or vicarious trauma or all the above. Now, one of the main ones, and I know I learned about this term years ago because I was suffering from it, but post-traumatic stress disorder. And maybe a lot of people going through that and dealing with that, that kind of trauma. Now, trauma is an experience with an interpretation. It's how you interpret it as life-threatening, okay? We don't stop being scared when we've been traumatized. You know, we're always, you know, in that mode. We stay that way all the time, every moment, living in fight or flight. So PTSD is a normal response to abnormal events, but the normal thing for the body to do is to shut down many times. But PTSD is a normal response to abnormal events. It is a disassociation, going back to the bad experience. You look like you are spaced out, not living in the moment. And so we want people to recover. We want people to get back to normality and to be able to live a joyful, happy, productive life. So recovery is important. And when we talk about recovery, we talk when you begin to talk about whatever you spend, even talking about the trauma and the healing thing, when you begin to talk about these traumatic events, you do not go back and relive the event while you're talking about it. You know, you're okay with it. You could talk about it now. I know there's probably some folks that were so stressed out and angry and fearful and traumatized, you couldn't look at TV. You don't want to hear nobody say anything about it or anything. But if we're going to recover eventually, we got to get to a place where we can sit down and talk about these things. So that's, you know, my little understanding of trauma. But what we're talking about here is fear, because fear, when you talk about fear, it is an unpleasant emotion and it's caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous or likely to cause pain or is a threat to you. And so fear is a chain reaction in the brain that starts with a stressful stimulus and ends with the release of chemicals that cause a racing heart, fast breathing, energized muscles, among other things, also known as we mentioned before, the fight or flight response. We don't consciously trigger it or even know what's going on until it has run its course. If we couldn't be afraid, though, we wouldn't survive for long, right? We'd be walking into ongoing traffic, stepping off of rooftops, carelessly handling poisonous snakes. We'd be hanging out with people who have tuberculosis. In humans and in all animals, the purpose of fear is to promote survival. We all have some kind of fear, right? Even the most courageous people have fears to overcome. I have never met anyone that didn't have a fear of something. And, you know, I used to be in a gang. I'm a former gang member, so I've seen a lot of things and experienced a lot of things. And I had this one friend that was, he was, I thought he was like one of the most fearless persons that was on the streets. I mean, he'd take guns from people. Folks put guns on, he just jump right in front of them and threaten them still while they got the gun. The people would be scared of him. They'd be scared to shoot him or anything because he was so intimidating. And I remember, me and my friend here that I'm telling you about, we was one day in our house, watching a movie, and it was a horror show. And you know how when the scary part comes on, the music start playing and everything. And when before the scene show came on, he covered his eyes like he was scared and afraid. And so I kind of like, wow, bro, I thought you were courageous. You could face anything, and you scared of a movie, of actors. It's not real, brother. But it goes to show you, people are fearful of a lot of stuff if they really show their true side. So some people are afraid of heights. Some are afraid of water. Some fear being alone. Others are afraid of spiders, snakes. I believe the greatest fear that most people have is dying. Of course, if you go to the doctor and they give you that report that something is wrong, the first thing you start wondering, am I going to die? So most people fear of dying. They fear those things that can lead to death also, like sicknesses, disease. If somebody's outside shooting, you want to get down because, hey, I don't want to die. Car accidents, and then also we suffer from and we fear losing someone you love, and care a lot about, you know what I mean? Like your mother, your father, your family members, your kids, friends, your husband, your wife, people that you really care about. So what can we do about fear? Experiencing fear every now and then is a normal part of life, but living with chronic fear can be both physically and emotional debilitating. So, number one, fear causes you to doubt your walk with God. For those who believe in God, and I do, to be fearful is to be faithless. So you must deal with your faith in your walk with God and not doubt God. You must trust God and whatever you're going through and whatever you're dealing with. Because fear can cause you to be defeated in your mind, in your spirit, and therefore paralyzes you. Fear can be contagious. It can spread to other people when you're fearful. And so one of the things that you want to do, you gotta be able to trust God. You gotta be able to have faith. Don't give up on hope and believing that things will get better. You know what I mean? And one of the reasons why you need to overcome fear, because fear will keep you from seeing God's promises become a reality in your life. And God said, I know the plans that I have for you. He have plans to do you good and not harm. And you got to believe that. Even in spite of all the things that's going on around us, the true reality is that as the scripture says, I'm not here to preach to you, but as the scripture says, there's no weapon formed against a child of God that shall prosper. And so just remember that when you belong to God, you got God on your side, and all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And it doesn't matter what area you're living in or what you're dealing with, you're going to get through it, and you're going to be okay, and you're going to see that God is going to get you through. But if you allow fear to overtake you, it can kill you. And so that's why you need to overcome fear. And how do I overcome fear? Acknowledge your fears. If you don't come to reality and acknowledge it, we want to play, like we brave, we bold, and so on, but you got to acknowledge it. And once you acknowledge it, confront it. Have that talk. Make that decision. Maybe it's something you have to let go. You'll probably have to confront your fear many times before you can declare it conquered, okay? Learn the truth about fear and your walk with God, okay? Through God's promises, take control of your life. Take it back, okay? Faith invites God into the situation, and that's what you want to do, because we live by faith and not by sight. And so I just want to say that a little bit about, fear and trauma and trusting in God, believing that God is going to get you through no matter what. It's not that bad. Okay, I don't care. Sometimes, just like we blame the media for stuff, sometimes the media play into the fear stuff on both sides. So know what the truth is before you get into listening to a lot of this stuff, because perception is everything, and if you perceive it, it can mess you up. and traumatize you over and over and over again. And so don't put yourself in those kind of situations. Put yourself in a situation when an environment that you can thrive in. So I want to bring into the discussion Miss Joanne Fields with Proactive Civic Engagement, and Dr. Vanjie Ackridge. I hope I pronounced your last name right. She's a licensed educational psychologist, and so we're going to talk about this electoral process and where do we go from now, and moving forward. Miss Joanne Fields, we've had you on the show several times. This is our first time having Miss Ackridge, and Miss Ackridge, I'd just like for you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
First of all, good morning, and thanks for having me.
Yes.
As you mentioned, I am a licensed educational psychologist and am tasked with being well-versed in educational law as well as child and adolescent development.
Oh.
So I help both K-12 students and adults with their learning processes and helping them gain access to needed supports and services in the community and, various educational systems.
Right. Okay. So how long you been doing that?
17 years.
Ooh. Okay. All here in San Diego?
Yes.
Okay. Are you from San Diego?
Basically, I came here when I was 2, so basically.
I'm not going to ask your age, but I came here when I was 2 years old also.
I was 2 coming from LA, yeah.
Yeah, I was born in El Centro.
Okay.
And my mom was born in El Centro, but her family came from Arkansas.
Okay.
And from Arkansas, they went to El Centro. And my mom was born there, and I was born there when she was 2 years old. My aunt was here in San Diego, so she moved here when I was 2 years old.
Okay.
And
it's hot out there.
been here ever since. Oh yeah, fried egg down there and so on. So since the elections have ended, it has been a long ride. I'm talking about from when this stuff first started. Because I know one of my things was, man, I'd be glad when this is over. Let's move on to something else. And now because Trump won, President-elect Trump won, the issue is now we're shocked, we're surprised. So now we got to continue to live this and deal with these things rather than moving forward to other stuff. It's dominating on TVs and so on. So how do you all feel about all this? And you would begin with you, Ms. Fields.
Well, it hasn't even been a week yet. We're still, I believe, getting over some shock.
Mm-hmm.
But as the numbers were rolling in, the first numbers I saw from Indiana and Kentucky were overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, man, this is not looking good. Those were just the early ballots coming in, right? And I was like, they organize.
Right.
They're turning out the vote. We have to turn out the vote. And so I called Vanjie that evening, and we're having conversation. She's my resident psychologist for school or out of school, and I just know that I need to go to a professional trying to deal with these emotions because personally, I felt I did all I could do. We were on your show with Ground Up Youth Foundation, and out of that comes out PACE, Proactive Civic Engagement. We're being proactive. We got our young people registered to vote. We brought them to the polls. We even posted where you can get a free ride on Uber and Lyft nationwide. We did all we could do, but it wasn't enough. So that was that wake-up call. Well, like, damn it, what did we do wrong? Or was it me? Who was it? Because we had our conversation yesterday at MLK Park. We had a forum on this very topic. And I was like, who are the closet voters out there for Trump? Because it had to be somebody because the numbers were overwhelming.
Yeah, but he didn't get California, though. So
he didn't get California, but we all have relatives and friends out of state. So someone out there did. They turned it out. They organized. So that, for me, that makes us reflect on what can we do better.
Right.
Because I am upset because I have deep concerns. I received phone calls the morning after from security at Moore's telling me, Joanne, you need to have a forum. The kids are walking around depressed. And then that night we had the Moore's cluster meeting. We brought this up to the area superintendent, and he's like, we can't get so political because there are people that want Trump in place. So there's that balancing act that you can't offend both sides, but I feel we need to deal with the emotion. And that's why I turned to Dr. Akridge for that guidance, because when you start to talk about this topic, we can't just open up a wound and just let it keep bleeding. I need a professional. So I'm glad that you're giving us this space to have this discussion, because kids are asking, how do we deal, or parents are asking, how do we deal, because there's a lot at stake. Dr. Akridge?
So I appreciate the fact that you started the show talking about trauma and fear, because I think that really captures what we are experiencing as a nation.
Right.
And I shared with the group yesterday about an experience of dropping my car off for service. Local luxury dealership, not a whole lot of us in there.
Right.
And walking in there feeling some type of way, not because anybody had done anything to me, but, really trying to wrap my head around that silent majority. Like, who are you? Like, trying to figure out, are you that closet voter, and really trying to sort through my energy about the situation.
Right.
And then sort of fast forward to yesterday after the forum, my daughter and I go to have lunch, and I had on some African garb, and a white woman approached me. Red hair, freckles. She approached me and kind of caught me off guard. She comes up to me, maybe 10 inches from my face, and says, "You're gorgeous." But I found myself in that fight or flight, like, time out, back up, what's going on? And I really had to check myself in my reactions as far as, the feelings that we're feeling after the election, the fear that has then become contagious, and then being able to process my own emotions about it. So it was very fascinating that she also had her daughter. So then we both began to explain to our daughters the exchange that we just had, and that it was peaceful and it was pleasant, and it wasn't anything for either one of them to fear. Like, there were, two women exchanging, courtesies to each other. But I think that fear that it is happening is very real, and that is, kind of what we were encouraging people to do yesterday, is empty the cup. Empty the cup. Why are you fearful?
Okay, and let's stop, because I know we got to go to a break, and we probably went over, but we will be right back, because this is an important discussion we need to have. So stay tuned and call somebody right now. Tell them to tune in to KBLKRadio.com. We'll be right back after these brief commercials.
San Diego's news source for R&B, KBLK.
All right, welcome back to KBLKRadio.com. This is your host, Bishop Bowder, on What's Happening Now. And we're talking about the future of our community's participation in the electoral process. And so we were talking with Dr. Akridge, I always get the name wrong. And you were sharing with us, about how people are feeling and reacting, and yourself, and using yourself, and so on. So we can continue on.
Sure. So, the question I was asking, and am encouraging other people to take time and process for themselves, is, what is the fear and what is it stemming from? And far too often things happen in our communities, in our nation. People are upset and are angry, and then react or respond out of anger, instead of emptying their cup and being real about, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? There's no productive action, if I can just be frank, that occurs when you're angry. So by really getting to the root of the cause, as far as where those issues are stemming from, I really think that as a community, as a nation, we can be more productive. And, that was our hope and intent yesterday, to provide a safe place for people to empty their cup and really start there.
Okay, so when our emotional capacity is full of negative emotions, and further negative emotions result in an overall, which it is seen to in the form of a variety of behavior. You see all types of actions. How do we empty this emotional cup? You know, if a person is hurting and need comforting, how do we get them to? How do we play that role?
So, first and foremost, I want to just state for the record that social media is not a place to process your emotions.
Okay.
If you are in need of processing your emotions, I would hope that you are having some human contact in addition to social media.
Right.
So with that being said, I mean, it's important that everybody has within their support network someone of kindred spirit that has a similar understanding, but is not going to be a yes woman or man in their circle.
Okay.
Hey, I see you feeling some type of way, and I'm here to support you and be your sounding board, but I'm going to keep it real with you when you out of pocket
Right.
or your actions are not conducive to real healing.
Right, right.
And I think that is an area of growth for, most folks. I see a lot of people processing their emotions on social media. I get it. It's an outlet, but I'm hopeful that is not the end all of your processing.
Right, because you don't have a real person there to really interact with and deal with. I remember I was reading this book years ago about the author was talking about his daughter. And she got afraid at night. It was a storm and all kind of things in there, and she was scared. So he went in and tried to comfort her. And, he was geared to leave, so he was trying to, he's Christian, so he's trying to tell her, hey, God is here with you, and you'll be okay. And when he's geared to leave, she said, I know, Dad, that God is here, but right now I need some skin. So I can touch it. And a lot of times we don't realize that, and we're not going to get that on social media and all these other different places of things, but we need that support present, right there.
And, being able to empty your cup has a lot to do about your own personal emotional intelligence as well as your communication skills.
Right.
How can you convey to someone, anyone, how you are truly feeling?
Right.
I mean, that is why I have job security, because that is a skill that many people struggle with.
Exactly.
So then you add this extra layer of politics and the fear and, the energy. Let's be real. I mean, Trump's campaign was based on, reckless conversation and vindictive, things that he said that were hurtful. And then having led his campaign in that fashion and then won, many people feel like people have been given sort of carte blanche to now behaving that way is okay.
Right.
Because in some way, shape, or fashion, it's acceptable and or you will be rewarded. So talking about the feelings that are centered around that is really where I would love to see people start if we have any hope of moving past the anger and then being unified in, next steps as far as, one, our survival,
Right.
and how do we, avoid a repeat of either the election or, the surfacing of these feelings or both.
Right. And when I think about the election and so on, because even before I was undecided until last minute, at least on the president. One time I was just going to vote, on the down the ballot, on other issues and things that were important to me, in dealing with this process. But when you look at, I guess, the negativity and a lot of things that people were really surprised by, and what the media was saying, he's especially when deal with President-elect Trump, it's, he's not going to win, he's not going to do this, and he just every time begin to surprise, and I think what happened, at least with me, you're thinking in terms of, okay, let's get to the election, get this over with so you can be gone. So we'll have to deal with you no more, because you believe in what you've been told. And then when you find that he won, like, oh, Lord, we got to deal with this for 4 years, but then when you think about it from another perspective, it's like, I'm the one that got myself carried away, involved in all of this. So step back a minute, and do a true assessment, look at this, and analyze it, and, make you decide how you're going to cope and how you're going to deal with this.
And as a professional who does this as a living, I mean, I absolutely had to do that and pull myself away from it, because found myself, responding in ways that are not typical of me, and like, Vanjie, you lightweight tripping, like you have become paranoid and looking over your shoulder. So, really having to, check myself on that. And I remember the day after the election, sort of going to my car, preparing to go to the office and looking up like, okay, well, the sky is still blue, the birds are still chirping, and really doing some reality testing to find, some middle ground to really cope with the emotions that are surfacing, which are very real. And I don't want to take that away from, anyone that's going through that, but also the reality of this is how it went down and this is what it's going to be.
Yeah, and one of the things that I was looking at, because yesterday when I was coming from church, we have church on Saturdays, and I was on the freeway, and this gentleman, he was I was like in the center lane, he was over on the right, in the lane on the right side of me, and he for some reason seemed, at least in my perception, he pulled in front of me because he had a truck, he had his flag, American flagging, but then he had a Confederate bumper sticker on it, and so he got right in front of me, so I see this, so I pull out of that lane and pass him on up, and moving on and so on. I didn't even bother to look at him because I said, I'm not going to even give you the time of day or the attention on this. I'm ignoring you completely. And he sped up and pulled right alongside me, and he tried. I could tell by the way how fast I was going, he was really trying to, so I speed up even more. And I still ignored him. I didn't look at him or anything, act like he wasn't even there. Then finally he stopped and he slowed down and he disappeared somewhere. And the first thought that came to my mind is, are these folks getting bold enough to try to do these things? Because what happened with Trump. But then I thought about it like, I live in El Cajon. I see this all the time. This before Trump came on the scene, even announced his presidency, not only did they have American flag, but they drive around with Confederate flags out in El Cajon and so on. So this is nothing new. So then, you have to kind of like figure out, what has changed, and then the second thing I begin to do, to look at least here in California and San Diego County, driving around and so on. And I began to, as I was going somewhere, I began to look at all the cars, all the trucks, everything that's on the freeway and so on. I said, that was the only idiot that I seen doing that. It's not like, this is, you got a whole bunch of people running around all of a sudden out here doing it. So I think sometimes, but with our fear and our anger and our perception of things, what we hear in the media and what we see, we begin to feel like, is this going to be the new normal that we got to deal with the Confederate flags and people getting crazy? But that was just one incident. But sometimes we can tell, like you said, when the lady jumped your face, it's like, because we kind of like, I guess, still traumatized in that fight and flight mode and don't know what is, hey, are you a threat to me or a friend or foe? What is it here?
Right.
And so we do, I know I have to like really assess things and kind of look at things from a positive perspective versus a negative perspective. And once I begin to look around me, and I was like, it's going to be all right. I don't think this is something that, we'll at least hear, that you're going to have to be confronting more than what we already had to deal with him before he came on the scene and so on. I know some people get more bold and says he's normalizing it, which I believe may be true, but I think sometimes we can have some exaggerations too. What are your thoughts?
Well, I definitely hear the concerns about, his behavior through the campaign being normalized. But, what I think is really tragic, which has contributed to the fear, is that, there was this reckless behavior and then he, gets elected. And I'm going to guess it was probably a little surprise to him as well. And then he has this moment where he has to pivot and begin to talk about unifying. Right. So then people are looking at him sideways and each other sideways, like, time out.
You're a divisive person.
Right. So how do we go there? How do we get to that particular situation? So, you can't piss in somebody's Cheerios and be like, here, it's real milk.
No, I ain't taking it. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid.
Exactly. So, I think that is the real challenge of where we are at and where, the energy is really stemming from.
Right. And, my thing is and then we can move on to some other things, but, and maybe I'm wrong for this thinking. I'm not perfect and I don't have the right thinking all the time. But, I know that I'm fighting against racism all the time. I'm dealing with this stuff is the racist narrative that is out there. People who are very subtle with how they do things, and you could see it. And I was kind of, I don't want to say appreciative, but when I seen how it was being normalized, from one perspective, I said, okay, this brings it out so people can see what we've been talking about all the time. It's kind of like with the police brutality, where, I see a lot of videos now, but folks are saying, man, this stuff been going on all the time. They're just capturing it on video now, but this is not anything new. And so, especially with people of color, we know, and especially blacks, because we easily identify, we know that racism is not something that just happened when Trump got on board, as far as the way it's being normalized. But I really believe that with him being there, it brings it out. But when you bring it out, you can identify it. It gives you more of the ability and the wherewithal to fight against it, where people try to deny it before. Now, there it is. It's not hidden no more. It's not in the closet anymore. So the very things that we've been saying and fighting against and been telling y'all, you haven't been listening, there it is.
Well, I think people shy away from the conversation about race and race relations. And we are definitely witnessing, history at this particular point where there is no running from this conversation.
Exactly.
Where you're right. I mean, it does happen all the time. Here I am, a doctorate level psychologist possessing 5 degrees, tons of experience, but you better believe when I walk in to rent a car, for some reason, my credit card doesn't work, or my money isn't green.
Right.
And, having those moments and epiphanies. And I remember very clearly being in a rental car company, having a breakdown, just in tears, like regardless of my educational attainment, what's in my bank account, what I drive, whatever the situation, I am still viewed as a black woman and less than.
Right.
And having that moment and realization is very real. And that's something that is part of my daily existence. And people forget that. Yeah. Oh, she's a doctorate. Oh my gosh, she's very articulate. Well, am I not supposed to be able to put 2 sentences together?
Right.
Like, what is that about?
Exactly.
But here we are in a situation where there is no running from this conversation.
Exactly.
And I know that there are many people out there that are really wanting to speed past this conversation, saying, okay, well, I'm tired of talking about it. I'm sorry.
Right.
But this is a real situation as it pertains to, how people of color feel in America and have been feeling for quite some time, and people being really perplexed about how there are marginalized populations who supported such a, negative and divisive narrative.
Right.
And those are real feelings. So I'm sorry, folks.
Yeah.
Racism and the conversation of needing to talk about it is here.
Exactly, and you can't escape it. That is for sure. So, what concerns do young people have in regards to this election? I'm sure they have some valid concerns. What are some of the concerns, Ms. Fields? And
what I'm hearing right off is immigration, and how I think at the Morris campus, the kids are older. And they understand the process a little bit more than a middle schooler. What I was hearing from our principal at Bell, there was a Filipino student in tears because her family is talking about moving back to the Philippines.
Wow.
And that was within 24 hours of the election. But the reaction is that real to them that, we might as well leave. We're not welcome here. And I'm not sure if they're part of the Filipino Muslim community, but that is the second largest religion in in the Philippines, and we know what he was saying about that. And then also, it's not just their immediate family. It's also neighbors, and so there is a discussion of how things are playing out, because when you look on social media, we all know it's strong. We're the three of us in the studio. We are we promote this online. The radio is on the internet, so you can't avoid all
Right.
the memes that are out there and the fights that are breaking out on school. And I saw a story in the LA Times where a substitute teacher was telling a student that, you're going to get deported, and we know where you live, and your family's they're going back to Mexico, and you're going to be in the foster care system. What the hell? Is that how you talk to kids? You're supposed to be teaching kids, and you're teaching hate. But where do we go from here? Because we know it's that's what's going on in the community. But what in our position with the reach of radio in our leadership role, where do we go from here? And again, I really appreciate Dr. Akridge letting us know it is emptying out your cup. We are here. I'm here. I protect my kids, my immediate kids, my kids in Ground Up Youth Foundation, the kids that I work with at Morris and Bell and District E and the community at large. Those are our kids. We need to assure them that we will protect you. We need to educate you on this is not doomsday, because there's people saying that that are on the Republican side. That's how they were feeling when President Obama got elected, right? And they're saying like, hey, now it's our turn. We didn't do the well. Everyone reacts differently, but there was that reaction as well.
Yes, it did, because there were successions all in the South. A lot of those states were trying to make secessions. They sent the petitions, whatever they did to these. I remember on it just last 2012.
But when you see on the news 1 million people protesting in one city, and then there's multiple cities protesting, that's unrest that you got to deal with. And if he's saying that we need to unify, well, then what does that look like?
Yeah.
And it starts first at home, I believe, and then it's God, family, community. That's the order that I operate in. So,
and my thing is that because one of the things I know Al was saying is as far as who he's going to put in his cabinet with blacks and so on. But here's where I feel about that. I feel about that is when President Bush, first Bush, George H.W. Bush, whatever, was in office, and he put Clarence Thomas in there. That, to me, I don't know how, I know race is important, but I don't know how important it's going to be with this, because if you can't put someone in there that really represent the masses of the black people, if that's why you put that face in there. Though we don't want a quota just to say you got a black person and they're not qualified to represent the people that race, because if you put a black person in there that's act white, and what I mean by that, with white supremacy, you're not really American until you learn how to act like them and become white. And we need to be able to be who we are and bring who we are to the table. Like Dr. Akridge was saying, you got to respect her, for who she is. She's not trying to be like them. Yeah, she's an educated woman, but she's still black. And stand for who she is versus trying to act and be like them. And I think we should transcend race and all that, but we're not there yet. In the sense of when a person see me, they see a black man. That's the first thing they see. They don't see American. They see a black person. And then they have the stereotypes, the racist narrative, and so on. Miss Dr. Akridge, you look like you want to say something there.
No, I mean, when you're speaking about, essentially the acculturation process and where, people
Right.
Are on that continuum as to who he may put in the cabinet. I mean, I think that's a lesson for all people, let alone something to be considered for the cabinet, is being comfortable in the skin you're in.
Right.
I operate as a professional, being authentically who I was divinely appointed to be.
Exactly.
With my expertise in my vocational lane, but still just being Vanjie.
Right.
And love it or hate it, I mean, that is who I am. And I am, fortunate to have colleagues of all ethnicities who respect and, care for me,
Right.
being authentically who I am.
Amen.
And I think that is part of the challenge and the surprise of the silent majority in the election is, that was a well-kept secret,
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I felt a bit duped and, moments of sort of distrust, like what is going on in society that people were not in a place to be authentically who they are,
Right.
whatever that is. And I know that's sort of a double-edged sword.
It sure is.
Be careful what I'm asking for.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
that was the best kept secret, like, ever. And I have 2 middle school kids at home and who were super emotionally invested in the election. There were some heated debates in middle school classrooms where folks was getting detentions and all kind of stuff. So the night as the votes were rolling in, my 11-year-old son was pacing, and he's watching, he's sighing, he's like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe this. And, at some point I said, well, looks like you were waiting for Hillary to hit that 3-point shot at the buzzer. And he was like, yep. I said, it ain't gonna happen, baby. And
Right.
really just having to deal with him and his emotions. But, at the end of the day, being in a society where we are, respected, and authentically being able to be,
Right.
who we are, is the ultimate goal.
Right. So, moving on, I know one of the things that the positive things that we've had happen in California, we have our first African American U.S. Senator has been elected, Kamala Harris. And I know a lot of people excited. I didn't vote for the first time primaries. I voted for Loretta, but this last time I did vote for Kamala, and the only reason why I did is because Obama came out in support of her, and I think that's important to me, because I've seen how President Obama led the conversation in dealing with mass incarceration and some of the things that he's done, because you're dealing with a Republican Senate and Congress. It's not too much that he was able to do through legislation and policy. So he let a lot. He kind of just went in there and began to release a lot of people from prisons and things like that. And I thought that was awesome what he was doing. But I was against Kamala because her signature, because she was the lead prosecutor in California, and
State attorney.
yeah, state attorney, and but her signature was on a lot of those Supreme Court battles that we were fighting, dealing with a lot of unfair policies, dealing with gangs, and a lot of our young men being locked up unjustly. And when we were fighting a couple of years ago with the Justice for SD 33 and reached out to her, she never responded, never came, never even gave us a conversation. So I was like, okay, I don't want nothing to do. So when I heard she was running, I was like, what good is she going to do? She can be black, but that don't mean that she's going to represent our values or represent what we stand for and so on. But when Obama came out and endorsed, I said, okay, well, maybe he sees some good in her that I don't see, so I'm gonna trust that. 'Cause I really didn't know too much about neither one. But with me, it's never about voting because of a race of an individual, but it's more so looking at their policies and looking at where you taking me, with all of this, because I'm not going to be tricked anymore, and I'm gonna be on my guard all the time against anyone who tries to come up and take us backwards when we're trying to undo a lot of stuff that's been done since the 70s, that has led to mass incarceration. But what are your thoughts with our new U.S. Senator?
Well, I appreciate that she did come to San Diego. There were stakeholders. I didn't get to attend, but that's okay.
This is her second time
yes,
coming.
She came. But this is where we come in as holding people accountable.
Right.
Whether it's our U.S. Senator or our local city council person. There are elections that took place that we did not lose, like that seat. I voted for Kamala because I believe that she represents the values that I seek and abide by. So, of course, having that connection, we want that direct connection, but we don't have it all the time.
Right.
But when it does come to policies, we can speak out on it. Like, there was the report on racial profiling for us here locally in the city of San Diego. How many people came out to hear that report and more importantly speak on it?
Right.
Does it speak to you? Do you approve how many times black and brown people get pulled over?
Right.
How many times we've been searched and found nothing? We have to hold them accountable when we don't like what's going on.
Right.
So that's a part of the process of the political process. It's not just voting. Voting is important, yes, and that happens once every 2 years, right? But civic engagement all the way around means showing up to board meetings and advocating for our young people. Our students can go to the board meetings. They may need a ride, but they can go speak out. We've done that. We had a student in Ground Up, two of them actually, and Brandon was here and he spoke on it when they were blocking the transfer back into public school. They were in charter school and wanted to come back to their neighborhood school, and their transfer was being blocked.
Now let me ask some, and maybe Dr. Akers, you can come in this because what Ms. Fields is talking about in regards to participation and like, you know, when you talk about the racial profiling and so on, because I remember when they gave a report a few years ago, whenever it was, you know, a lot of people came out and so on, and are we, when it comes to especially people of color participating in these processes, you know, whether it's dealing with racial profiling or whatever, do you think there's a sense of hopelessness that people just have given up, like, you know, man, it's hopeless, ain't no use, why go down there and speak, you know, who's going to listen, nothing's going to change, it's continuing on. Is that it, and what can we do about that?
Well, I think that is definitely a piece of it, but it's also the intimidation of the system.
Okay.
And, you know, in the work that I do, being an educational psychologist, I mean, I am helping parents deal with the system of education. And it's okay to say, hey, that's not my lane, it's not my bag, I don't know that. But being comfortable to say, hey, I'm going to tap somebody in who does, that's going to help me, you know, get through the system. Right. So I think there continues to be that intimidation of the system, and with that intimidation then comes out, you know, the mama bears and the papa bears that, you know, looks angry, you know, and we get that tag whether we like it or not. And then again it impacts what, you know, parents or communities are trying to do. So again, being able to empty that cup, move past that anger, and being able to stack your deck of cards like any other ethnic group would do, and then proceed.
Right. You know, and I do agree with that, especially with not only just the intimidation but retaliation. You know, in the sense of when you speak out. You know, I'm very vocal and speak out, but I suffer the consequences a lot of times where people get angry, people cut you off, you know, you don't get invited to things anymore, and so on. So you kind of like are alienated from a lot of stuff because of who you are. And so I've seen and experienced myself with the retaliation, but I don't let that stop me. But some people, they, you know, I guess they don't want to be looked at as a troublemaker or as a problem. And we shouldn't even have to think in those terms, right? In a sense of, I'm just, you know, exercising my civil rights, my rights as a citizen here to speak out, to civically engage, something that if I don't like a report, I should be able to go speak on that report and yet still have a good relationship with law enforcement. But many times it doesn't work that way.
So here's what I accept as my truth, that the conversation that I have, not everybody can tolerate it, either because of where they are at, you know, emotionally, intellectually, or whatever the situation is. And you have to be able to digest a healthy serving of reality and truth conversation and sit at my table.
Right.
And I'm okay with that. It's not for everybody. That seat may be reserved for somebody else. Yeah, exactly. And I'm done, you know, and keep it moving. So at this particular point, and, you know, I sort of joke like, oh, you know, I'm getting old, I'm going to say whatever I want to say. Like, I ain't been doing that all the rest of these years. But I just have to accept that I am being true to who I am, you know, what I believe, being my authentic self, and like it or not, that makes some people uncomfortable. Right. That's not a Vanjie issue. Right. You know, so I don't receive that. That's something you need to process and work through. But trust me, if you can tolerate my conversation, you're going to learn something.
Exactly. And here's the thing, talking about the mayor of our city of San Diego, and the chief of police, because one of the things that I think we also have a problem with, and I know we got a few minutes left, is, well, the mayor came out and spoke out against Prop 57 along with the chief of police. I don't know if she did it because she works for him and had to do it, or she really believed these things. But they put out some misinformation, about Prop 57, and we have to talk to people to straighten that out. But I encountered something last week that really disturbed me and bothered me, because we do walk and knocks with law enforcement to try to do problem solving and empower community, offer resources to community, and build that bridge. And we went to a door, and the lady began to complain about the homeless, encroachment, and things like that. And the police officer began to blame Prop 47 and Prop 57 for it. And I mean, some of the things that he was saying were just straight out not true. And in my mind, I'm like, I had a conversation with him as we finished and everything, and he still was holding his guns. He went as far as to say Prop 57 will reduce felonies of a person assaulting a police officer to a misdemeanor. I'm like, where do you get that from? That's not in Prop 57. But I'm like, okay, if the mayor's putting out misinformation and the chief is putting out misinformation, why won't they? And so you begin to understand how what we're coming up against when we talk about a system here, because they're not playing fair. And these are people that are supposed to be trusted and supposed to be looked upon as honest and telling the truth, but they're not. I heard it with my own ears. I seen it with my own eyes. I sat there and watched blatant lies be told to a resident about Prop 47, Prop 57. I'm glad Prop 57 passed, and we had Prop 64 that passed. I voted yes on that one also. So if I can get 30 seconds from each of you, how you feel the overall outcome of this election, the things that you voted on.
I think this is a great wake-up call. Just about everything that I voted for won.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that. Of course, we didn't get the top seat of my choice, but it was a choice of others.
Okay.
But it doesn't stop here. This is a new beginning, because I think people that were on the sideline, I think were like, hey, this serious.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? And maybe that is a wake-up call. So I hope they're not just motivated because of what they're seeing on social media, on the news, but that they really feel now that they have not just a vested interest, but they have the power to do something, that they truly have a voice. So I look forward to the organizing that is going to come after this, and we have another round. This battle might have been lost, but there's going to be another round. Another election has already started for the next city council person, and the next Congress person, the next state assembly, and the election in 2 years. Then there's a presidential election in 4 years. It's going to take that much time to keep our community educated and engaged. So I hope this isn't just a fad and that it goes away. I hope that we will truly have organizing. So I appreciate the process.
Okay. Dr. H.
So I, think that the fact that while it wasn't the outcome that many of us were hoping for, it does put race at the forefront of the conversation, which I think is super important.
Yes.
When we talk about civic engagement, being a mom of athletes, I want to make it plain, parents, is more than school in athletics. Civic engagement is something you should be encouraging your kids to do. And also, and we didn't get a chance to go there, that's probably a whole nother show, but the leadership in the community.
Yes.
I found it very interesting that there were folks who were upset about the outcome of our presidential election, while there are similar sort of things that are mirroring that process in our own community.
Thank you.
I'll say it,
Yes.
NAACP election.
And as far as respecting and honoring the voice of our young people,
Exactly.
we have,
Yeah.
struggles with leadership, where we have people on posts for time and eternity, and then you have young people, and I'm gonna throw myself in that bag included, who sort of peek and see what's going on, and then ultimately choose to go do other things because of the politics that
Right.
happen in the leadership in our own,
Oh, yes.
backyard.
Yeah,
So we
absolutely.
can't encourage kids and young adults to be critical thinkers and then not support their critical thinking.
Exactly. That's it. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful conversation. And we got to do this again. So, we'll probably be having you back pretty soon.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And so we thank both of you, Ms. Fields and Dr. Akridge, for being on the show. Tune in next Sunday, 10 o'clock, for another great show on what's happening out here on KBLKradio.com. Thank you, and God bless you, and you have a great day.